Military historian, U.S. Army veteran, and award-winning author Mike Guardia is back on Big Blend Radio today. In fact, he's been co-hosting with us with our previous guest, Sue Ingalls Finan, and he is the author of now, 15 books, he was saying,
wow.
including Hal Moore, A Soldier Once and Always, American Guerrilla, The Forgotten Heroics of Russell W. Volkman, Shadow Commander, The Epic Story of Donald D. Blackburn, The Fires of Babylon, Eagle Troop, and the Battle of 73 Easton, Hal Moore on Leadership, Winning When Outgunned and Outnumbered. The latest interview we did with him was in October on Crusader, General Don Starry, and the Army of His Times. His latest two books, including his new children's Christmas book, World War II, Night Before Christmas, includes Hal Moore, A Life in Pictures, just came out. So, everyone, he is our military historian here on Big Blend Radio. You can see his expert page on blendradioandtv.com. But go get his books. They're all on Amazon. You can go right to Mike's website, military Mike's website, MikeGuardia.com. Mike, how are you doing? Are you having fun being a co-host today?
I am, Lisa. It is great to be back on the show.
Hey, you know what? You are a great co-host. I love it. I'm like,
wow, man.
Where did you learn all that stuff?
Yeah.
Where did that all come from? Like you've been.
I don't know. I guess it was. I guess it was just all those years I spent in the Army, and probably a few years I spent as a teacher. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me, like how much. And we put you on the spot, Johnny on the spot, Mike on the spot today, and it was like amazing to hear this history that you know. But we did hear that you are sending Nancy and I, Priscilla, our little sock monkey, our travel mascot, on a specific story mission as we travel full-time on our Love Your Parks tour across the country for 3 to 5 years. What is that all about?
Indeed. Well, that mission, as it is to explore parts of the American wilderness, and in so doing, to follow in the footsteps of some of the great American generals, to include but not limited to Russell Volkman, Don Blackburn, Don Starry, and of course the famous Hal Moore.
The famous Hal Moore, and your latest book just came out, Hal Moore, A Life in Pictures. Tell us about that.
Yes.
Congratulations, and we do accept the mission.
Yes, we do.
Because I've been looking, and
it's fun.
We're ready. Is that okay? We're ready to go. We're ready to. Can we say we're ready to deploy now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By all means, full steam ahead.
I've got some connections for you. I was looking at a list of places that your generals have been to and worked in, and I'm like super excited to give you some feedback on this. But we are going to deploy. But tell us about Hal Moore, A Life in Pictures, because it just came out. So it's a photo journal of Hal.
It sure is. So Hal Moore, Life in Pictures is, I think the best word that I can use to describe it is a coffee table book of sorts. It's a bit oversized. It measures 7 by 10 inches, and it is illustrated throughout with more than 350 color and black and white photographs that chronicle the life of Hal Moore from his earliest days growing up as a child in rural Kentucky, through his tenure at West Point, through his service in occupied Japan right after World War II, to the bloody hilltop battles in Korea, and of course, to his leadership in Vietnam, which of course became the subject of the Mel Gibson movie We Were Soldiers, and everything that he did beyond Vietnam. It takes a look at a life of a leader and a life of a national hero.
It's interesting too, because you think about what he's done. You've got 3 books, a photo book, yes, but you've got 3 books on Hal. How did you first discover him as someone that you want to, focus your writing and your publishing energy on?
Well, let's wind the clocks back to 2002, March 1st, 2002. Here I was, this young 17-year-old man, and I was walking into a movie theater. I had seen the trailer for We Were Soldiers, and I was excited to be seeing it on opening night. And that probably had to have been one of the most well-invested 2 hours of my life at that point, because I left the theater thinking to myself, wow, this is an amazing war film. This has quickly become my favorite military movie. And it's the first movie that I had ever seen to portray the Vietnam veteran in a positive light, because, you know, for years my generation had grown up watching all these movies like Platoon and Full Metal Jacket and Apocalypse Now. And they all had one thing in common, and it was always portraying the Vietnam veteran as someone who was malicious or someone who was mentally unstable or someone who, generally speaking, was just a misfit in modern society. I mean, we all remember the images of Lieutenant Dan, right? Yeah, but here was the first picture that I had seen that had no political agenda and was just an honest and very intimate portrayal of, you know, these men who went overseas willingly, and they fought and they bled for their country and struggled as they came back home to a country that more or less either ignored them or treated them like criminals. So I was determined at that point to learn as much about Hal Moore as I could. And in the years following the film's release, I read the book that the film was based on, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, that Moore co-authored with Joe Galloway. And then I went looking for a biography on Moore himself, because, you know, the one battle at Ia Drang was just one little cross-section of what had been his career. I mean, I knew he had fought in Korea, that he did some time in occupied Japan. Well, I mean, gosh, I mean, what else has he done? And somebody's had to have written about it. And that's when I found out that there was no biography out there on him. I'm like, well, shucks, you know, if nobody's written about him yet, why don't I try and pick up the task? And, I was able to contact his youngest son, who was still a colonel on active duty at that time, and was able to get in touch with the family. Had several meetings with Hal Moore himself, where we just sat down and talked for, you know, hours on end about his life and career. And that's what led to the first book, which was the biography, came out 2013. And then while Hal Moore was still living, I got the idea to, do like a treatise on his leadership. And that's when another one of his sons piped in and said, well, Mike, you know, I was going through Dad's hard drive the other day and found an outline of a book he was planning on doing on his leadership style. We have these chapter outlines here, about 13,000 words at this point. Do you want to take it and do you want to flesh it out and, take this project across the finish line? And I jumped at the chance to do that. And then afterwards, as I was going through all of the pictures that I had, many of them didn't make it into the biography, and I was kind of disappointed. I said, you know what? Why not do a third installment? Why not make this a trilogy and make it a book that chronicles his life in pictures? And then here we go. Just this week, Hal Moore, A Life in Pictures has come out.
Wow. It's amazing.
I love that. I think it's important because I think that, war is such a subject that we can close our eyes to, especially when our country isn't being physically attacked and we're sending people overseas to do something. It's really convenient to distance ourselves from it and not look at it. And I think it's so important that people wake up and actually realize what's happening in this world and why it's happening and where they actually stand on it.
I think it was interesting when you were on the segment with us previously talking with Sue Ingalls Finan about her book, The Cards Don't Lie, and it's about, the Battle of New Orleans. And when you were talking about that, it was like, here's all these strategies and this is how, Andrew Jackson did this in the war. But it's human lives. I mean, and that's the thing, I think, where we have to realize people going out, men and women, and serving in multiple ways within the military, and what their lives are at stake. And I think when they're overseas, unless you are a family member, it just becomes this thing on the screen. And when I look at all the shootings happening right now in our country, it becomes this thing of there's a shooting every day. And I wonder, are we disconnected? What do you think, Mike, having served and still serving, do you feel like we have a disconnect? I know we've touched on this before, but I feel like with what you write, you keep it alive that we understand the complexity of being in the military, especially in leadership.
Right. Well, I think there's more of a disconnect now than there has been in the past, and I think that's really a function of the fact that American society as a whole doesn't have as much skin in the game as they used to. Because when I think about where we were throughout most of the 1950s and also into the 1960s, you had a peacetime draft. So it was generally understood that at some point in your life, if you were a male between the ages of 18 and 35, at some point you were going to be called up to do a 2-year stint of service in the military. And, you could be in the Army, it could be in the Air Force or what have you. But that was expected of you. And because that was expected, I think communities and families did a lot more back then to instill a sense of citizenship and instill a sense of patriotism. And, of course, since the mid-'70s, we no longer have a draft. It's an all-volunteer force. And while our Army, I think, is head and shoulders above where it was in the 1960s, American society has become a little more disconnected just by virtue of the fact that they don't have as much skin in the game as they did previously.
I totally agree with you on that. I really do, because it used to, as growing up in the 60s, the Vietnam War and everything that was happening was close to home because you had people that you knew that were going off to war. And so you were concerned and you were, educated on it, and you looked at the news and you were in it because you had people. You have people. Now it's kind of it kind of reminds me at the end of World War II when it was la, 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 this is fun. And then
everyone forgets what's going on.
And everybody now disconnects from people still in the armed forces for a reason. And because it's la, la, la. And then all of a sudden something happens now you're back in it. And, and hopefully the world will one day be at peace where we don't have to have it. But right now, people have to remember that we have an armed forces for a reason, and we can't just ignore.
You can't ignore it.
You can't ignore it.
Having lived in Africa, you can't.
Yeah, we know.
When we came back to this country, Mike, it was really interesting talking with people and I felt very unprotected in this country, to be honest, when we first came back. I was used to going through bomb checks everywhere. I was very used to that. And
always
living in South Africa and England, everything you're being checked for bombs. And terrorism was a normal part of life. And, my friends in school, the men went into military as a thing. You go out of school, just like Israel, where you do 2 years of service.
Absolutely.
And some were not equipped for what was being thrown at them during the time of what was going on, and some were. And Africa's that's a crazy topic, but there was this understanding of life and death. And then when we got over here, I felt like we were walking on clouds almost.
It was like Disney.
Yeah, and it made me really nervous. I mean, when we went to a mall, it was like I was in really.
Where's the check person?
Yeah, I was freaked out. I was scared going in there, and then I remember watching a box being left there, and somebody left in the food court or something, and I was like, you don't just pick up the box. And the security guard went to do it, and I'm like, dude, it's going to detonate any minute. It's going to blow up. And I came from a different country, a different world, and yet, I felt, and I remember getting into a discussion, a very lively one with a young lady once about, and it was pre-September 11th, and I'm like, I don't know if America's on it. Things will happen. They're like, oh, nothing will ever happen here. And it was a day later, 9/11 happened, and I just I felt terrible, really, because of that discussion. But I feel sometimes that that we need to bridge that gap, and I love that you're on our shows because I feel through this and through your books that it reminds people and gets people to understand these stories, that it reminds people. You know what I mean? we can't walk in the clouds. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just such a difference of things, and things will change. But let's talk about Hal Moore, because you send us on this mission, and Nancy and I are fully prepared and ready.
Yes.
And you gave us a list of some of the areas. We know we're going to be in California. We know Washington State, Colorado. We know Kentucky, okay. And Hal Moore was born in Bardstown, Kentucky, which is where we're going to be in central Kentucky, but basically we're going to do Kentucky, and that was one of our top things to do. So we're going to go to his birthplace. How does that feel? Is that good? We can go see his home, and we'll go find his childhood home. Is the family still living there?
Well, no. The house, I think, is currently on its fifth owner, but the house is still there, still in great shape. As a matter of fact, during one of the trips that I made to Bardstown, I met the current owner of the home because they attended one of the author events that I was at. And, oddly enough, Hal Moore's mother lived in that home until she was 100.
Wow.
Yeah, she lived to the age of 100 and passed away, I think, in 2001. So, yeah, from 1917 until 2001, Hal Moore's mother made that home her regular dwelling. And just to give you an idea of how resilient his mother was, for about, I want to say something to the effect of 55 years, she was an Avon lady, and she was an Avon lady right up until the day she died.
Wow. Yeah. Are you kidding me? That's amazing. So that's like strong stock going. Like that.
Avon calling.
Yeah. That's like,
I'm not going to say how come I know that.
Yeah. But no, that's amazing. So, and Hal Moore, I mean, he's one of those with a legacy. And so you put on this list Fort Ord in California, and I was looking it up, and we were there when we were right there when we went to Pinnacles National Park in Central California, right outside Salinas in Monterey County. He was there, and also Laguna Seca Motor Speedway. So did he do race cars or what? What's up with that? What did he do there?
Well, he was not a racer, but what he did, and I think really where he shined as a post commander, was that he was able to do a lot of community building events. Here was a man who had taken command of Fort Ord, and he's doing this right at the tail end of the Vietnam War. So the political and social climate of the country, particularly California at this time, was decidedly anti-war. A lot of citizens were very mistrustful of the military. And he's not only straddled by that, but he's also fighting an uphill battle saying, okay, well, the draft is going away in just like 2 short years. So the steady stream of conscripts is going away, and, we're going to have to rely on an all-volunteer force. Guys, we got to have a positive PR image and a positive PR campaign. So what he would do is he would often reach out to the city fathers, in places like Seaside and Salinas and Carmel and Monterey, pretty much go even as far as to the San Francisco Bay Area, and do all these community building events. Like they would sponsor the local Little League teams. They would have bake sales. They would organize parades. They would have have field trips for the kids to come onto Fort Ord. And one of the events that the family was telling me about was a soldier day of sorts that was done at the Laguna Seca Motor Speedway out in California, and and granted, I'm probably not remembering it 100%, but it was a big Army PR event where they were doing some joint recruiting, and it was they were essentially having some of the local racers there. And I mean, these were some pretty famous open formula racers at the time, saying, hey, we want to welcome all these brave soldiers here. Kids, this is something that we should all admire. Essentially using the racers as positive PR spokesmen for what Hal Moore was trying to do. And that's really just scratching the surface of how he was able to build ties of trust with the community at a point in time when trust in the military was at an all-time low.
Oh, see, this is it. This is exactly what we're talking about. That
true.
that trust
Yeah.
factor, that understanding factor. And I love this because this conversation, because I think people that want peace, we all go about it in different ways, right? Some serve in the military,
Mm-hmm.
some are, marching with flowers. Everybody does it in a different way. And I think it's important to understand that that's our goal. When we were talking about Andrew Jackson, yes, like you were saying in that segment, that there's the highs and lows, and the really big highs and the really deep lows. I think at the same time he had that thing where everyone come together on one united cause, and I think it is an understanding. I think we have to reach out and connect with each other, and I'm excited about this challenge because it puts us in places that we maybe don't always understand and know. Nancy and I, don't ask me about military ammunition things or how it all works. I don't know, but I want to know. I want to learn because that's how I'm going to understand things better. And I'm excited to go and follow in Hal Moore's footsteps, especially I'm interested. He went to Camp Stoneman, California, and I was looking it up
Mm-hmm.
online and realizing this is in the East Bay of San Francisco, and it's Port Chicago Naval Magazine National Memorial is there, Rosie the Riveter World War II Homefront National Historical Park is there, Eugene O'Neill and John Muir historic sites too, but he was right in the hub of these. Really, I think whenever it's a port, right, isn't that a big deal, Mike, that you're going to have military things going on? And there was also, as I recall, wasn't there like nuclear spots out in the Bay Area where we were worried about nuclear war, so that was also a post, not just for World War II, but for nuclear terror in that area?
Yeah, I remember I remember at one point we had let's see, there was the San Francisco Navy shipyard there, and it was a regular. I mean, it was pretty much a one of many points in the revolving door around the Pacific for a lot of our nuclear subs to be there, and it was San Francisco was considered to be a strategic target that in the event of a nuclear war. It would probably be it was also one of the places that the Soviets could hit the quickest.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So he was out there at Camp Stoneman, but what he was in Fort Ord, which is we were talking about, but Crested Butte in Colorado. So he liked to ski. Was he out there skiing?
Oh yeah.
Why not?
As a matter of fact, he was incredibly resilient, and this is where you really see his good stock starting to shine through. I remember one of the first interviews that we did, he told me, I skied all the way until my 80s.
Wow.
I mean, imagine that, an 85-year-old man hitting the slopes. I mean,
and
yeah.
we were thinking about hip replacements, knee replacements happening at that time.
Dude, I tried
or younger
skiing.
even. Yeah, that's not easy.
In my 20s, and I tanked at it big time.
I know.
No, I did. I couldn't even get off the chairlift. I closed my eyes, and people were yelling, "Jump!" I'm like, "No."
Yeah, because he also went to Yosemite National Park, and we have photos of him. I mean, these are these photos in your book, your new book?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Because these are like family photos. So he took his son out to Yosemite National Park when he was stationed out in California?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Sure was. I think he also did a return trip out to Yosemite when he was already living in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
His first love as a young child was always the great outdoors. He was an accomplished fisher, an accomplished hunter, well before his teenage years, and he carried that forward. Instilled, that especially his love of fishing. Instilled that into all of his children, and Yosemite was one of their preferred camping and fishing spots.
Have you been there before?
Sadly, I haven't. I have always wanted to go to Yosemite, though.
Oh,
Yeah,
Mike, when we go back, we've been there a few times now. I think 4 times. And it is like people say it's God's country. Everybody's got a different God, but it is like one of these places that you will do the jaw drop. And
It's amazing.
It is absolutely magnificent. It is incredible. And we went, actually this time of year is when we were there in 2013, and it was absolutely amazing to see the fall colors change. We were there in the snow, and people tend to go there in the summer, and that's when the crowds are there, especially Yosemite Valley is this popular area when you go down into the valley, and it's lush and green, and the meadows are awesome. But there is this thing about going in the winter when it's so crisp and clear. There's this quietness that happens to Yosemite that is just so beautiful.
When we sing Purple Mountain's Majesty, that's where I think of.
Oh, there
From
you go.
sea to shining sea.
Yeah.
When we sing that phrase, that's where my mind goes.
It's beautiful, and I can imagine him enjoying it out there, and getting that freedom. It's interesting too because, talking about national parks, you put on our list a Minnesota one, and you said,
"Cool."
You said to me, "This is for Russell Volkman." And you said to me, I know this isn't on the radar immediately, but now it is. You said Fort Snelling, Minnesota. And I looked at it. It was originally known as Fort St. Anthony. And it is actually within our National Park Service. It is the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, and it includes the fort. And so this is, I know you're in Minnesota. Is it far from you? Because we're making plans, Mike.
No, it is not far from me at all. And aside from being a historic site and aside from it being a national treasure, Fort Snelling continues to be a joint Armed Forces Reserve base where you have Army Reserve, Air Force Reserve, and Air National Guard all stationed there, all sharing the same base. It is adjacent to the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. And coincidentally, myself being an Army Reservist, that is where I'm stationed.
No way. So you're stationed in a national park unit. That's crazy. Really? Wow. That's amazing. Okay. Well, will you go get a passport stamp and put it up on Twitter for me and Facebook? I want to see a passport stamp. Go into their visitor center and get a passport stamp. I want to see it. That is so amazing. That is so cool. Okay, so we're going to have to do a detour to Military Mike. And so when we go there, we're going to be able to see where you work. That's cool.
Yes.
Awesome.
That is super cool. So now this is where Russell Volkman was, and now we were talking about Russell Volkman, and really when it comes to him and then Donald D. Blackburn, I was talking about them in regards to our conversation on the Battle of New Orleans in the previous segment, in regards to changing military tactics. Wouldn't you say these are two people that change things in regards to how battles happened? Like, we're going to change it up, and we're going to go rogue almost, right?
Absolutely. You especially see that with Volkman. Volkman, he stands out in history. Well, he stands out for what he did, but I don't think he's quite gotten. I don't think he's quite gotten the depth of recognition that he deserves. Because here was a man who was a traditional infantry officer, raised and trained in the traditional infantry schools of thought, very conventional style of warfare. But then when he found himself caught behind enemy lines in the Philippines during World War II, he had to create all these new concepts of guerrilla warfare on the fly, codify them, and he didn't really have a margin of error, because he said, well, trial and error isn't going to work for me, because if I err, then that means the Japanese are going to kill me.
Yeah.
So he made it work on the fly, probably the most intense on-the-job training that I can think of. And then after the war, comes back, sits down, thinks about it, processes it, synthesizes all the lessons that he learned, and retools those into the operational concepts of what today is the Army Special Forces. And it's almost mildly ironic, because when I wrote the book in 2010 and I pegged that thesis to it, I pegged the argument that this here is really the intellectual father of Special Forces. The book itself created quite a bit of controversy in the Special Forces community, and it for better or for worse, it generated some notoriety for me, which wasn't necessarily a good thing, being that I was a brand new lieutenant at the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Here's this tank commander who is a second lieutenant in the Army, and he's writing something that is disrupting, 50-plus years of orthodoxy in the Special Forces community. But aside from some of the divisions that the book created, there were a lot of voices of support that came from the established SF community that said, well, hey, if you follow this fellow's argument, he's really making a very coherent and a very convincing case that if we have to elect a father of Special Forces, it makes sense that the title really belongs to Russell Volkman.
Wow.
Wow, dude.
Wow. Military Mike, you keep going with this. I mean, because I think that that's exactly what it is, that people do these extraordinary things, and half of the time nobody knows. It's in that dust.
Especially when it's the military, because, the military and our forces, be it police, fire, Army, it's kind of like you don't talk about it.
Yeah, you do now when we've got social media and some of the stories go around, but when you write a book and you can stand up and be, a young lieutenant going out there and saying, hey, check this out. And how did you handle that? When now here comes the controversy, did you just stand strong and, how did you handle that?
I kept my mouth shut and I watched the arguments fly back and forth on the multiple forums.
Well done. Exactly. Well done.
And oh my goodness, some of those arguments that I saw break out on a lot of the various internet forums, they got pretty heated. And I really didn't know whether to be dumbfounded or frightened. I just said, I really just said to myself, oh, okay, well, this thing escalated quickly.
Wow. But, I think it's good. I think you can't, a little friction is good. A little change of mindset may be good for everyone at times. And it's, wow, you rock.
I think it's really hard for people to change their mindset, and I can imagine if you're in a battle zone and your commander does an about turn, not saying admitting defeat or anything, I'm saying about turn in tactics that you're used to and you've been trained to do and you understand, like battle plans, and then all of a sudden they go, now we're going to do it this way, that you're under you're pressurized, you're under the gun. And now you have to believe in your commander, or what? I mean, do you have an option there? What are you going to do? And so you're kind of like seriously have to do what you're told, or bail.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do?
Yeah. Don't you think his people? I mean, all of these generals that you're talking about, Volkman, Blackburn, Hal Moore, Don Starry. Don't you think that they all thought outside the box, which sometimes, that means that they're kind of shaking the lines, the rules a little bit. All of them did that.
Right. And you can generally get away with that in the military as long as you produce good results. That was really the case for Volkman and Blackburn. As a matter of fact, when Volkman stood face-to-face with General MacArthur, after conducting this guerrilla war against the Japanese for 3 years, MacArthur's words to him were essentially, well, Russ, you technically disobeyed my order to surrender, but you've been doing such a bang-up job here carrying on the fight to the enemy. You've killed so many Japanese soldiers that I really can't be angry with you. I'm promoting you to full bird colonel. Oh, and for your trouble, here's the Distinguished Service Cross.
Wow. Wow. So it is about,
So
you have to have results. You have to have something to back you up. You can't just go willy-nilly without something that you've done in the past.
Well, if you change the rules
culture.
and then you lose, I think you're in
Yeah,
trouble.
exactly. Okay. So now you've sent us for Russell Volkman, General, Minnesota, so we'll see you there. He was in San Francisco. It seemed like him, Blackburn was there. Seems like they all hung out in California at some point here. And that's cool. We like San Francisco. We got Golden Gate National Recreation Area, which actually takes in part of Muir Woods, takes in part of some of the East Bay areas, and it takes in Point Reyes, which also has military history. But it's also the Presidio. Have you been there? Have you been to the Presidio?
I have.
Isn't it unique?
I have. I've been. It is. It is incredibly pretty, and I am insanely jealous of those who get to be stationed there because, man, you cannot beat that view of San Francisco Bay.
I know, and the parking really sucks. But anyway, I'm just saying. But we went.
I mean, it had to be a primary target for any enemy.
That area.
And I know along the coastline of California there are places like Cabrillo. There's like
Cabrillo is interesting.
Yeah, and Porterville, like they had the stations. We went to a guy's farm where they had the lookout stations for World War II.
Bob McKellar's farm.
Yeah. Bob McKellar's farm, and we're like, what's that? And he goes, oh, that's where we were looking out during the war for planes.
But it was right in the Central Valley, near Salinas, right? In a way, yeah. I didn't understand why they were
That's when the war
out.
became real to us.
I didn't. I always thought it would be up along the coast. Then we've got Manzanar, which is a whole other story. But being in the Central Valley, they're having all these watch-out stations. And they were like, well, this was during World War II. And I'm like, you're in the middle of an orange grove, in the middle of a valley. Why are we having a watch-out? Was it because of Manzanar, do you think? Or why in the valley? Why? Like, I have to do a thing on that now. Is it because of air? Like, were we in? Yeah, the air. Was it because of the flight part of it, not just the ocean? Mike, do you think?
Could have been.
Yeah. Well, when we get back there, I'll start sending you things because we'll have to reinvestigate all of that now. But it was interesting. The Presidio was beautiful. It is also that was the spot of where San Francisco became San Francisco, and it was the destination of Juan Bautista de Anza, and he led 200 people from Mexico to the Presidio, and along with Father Font. And it's one of my favorite stories of, I don't know, for some reason it's connected, goes through Tucson where we are now, and that is how San Francisco was founded. And we went to El Polin this spring out there, and it's just it just is amazing to find this history of how he led people, how he went there, he did the route himself, he established relationships, then he came back through with the 200 people, all on foot. No one died over it. No. People after him took this route, and they were rude to the Indians, and they got slaughtered. Oh, basically.
Nice way of
well, they did. But it was about how he established relationships. So isn't that part of the leadership role in war, is like understanding where you can connect with these, with maybe your opposition, but you can be friends too, so that you can work through things? Isn't that part of it?
Yeah. It sure is. A lot of it lies in really being able to build strategic alliances. Particularly especially with the people who are hosting you. If you just want to look at some recent examples, I think one of the things that we could have done better in a place like Vietnam was to get more of those strategic alliances and those strategic partnerships strengthened and deepened with the South Vietnamese, because there was a lot of cultural misunderstanding there, and things that I think were, now of course there were many things about that conflict that were counterproductive. We've done at least like 5 dozen postmortems on everything that went wrong there, But one thing that I think could have really helped us out a lot was being able to build and strengthen those bonds of trust with the South Vietnamese, because I just don't think that they were there as strongly as they should have been.
You know, I think you're really right about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just went in so fast and so unprepared in a lot of ways because it wasn't really our choice to be there. And and most Americans didn't really understand why we were there because they didn't get the alliance with the French. And they just didn't understand that because there's a big gap in our history and history classes because we kind of do World War I and II, but we don't do the rest of it.
And people forget the Korean War
Because
that's one of the first
we don't
people
do
forget that.
We don't.
Bataan is always forgotten.
And we don't do that, and we don't do the 1812
Yeah,
war that
I mean
well either.
this is what's interesting, and I wonder if it's like the country was so busy fighting at that point. I don't know, but I don't understand why. But you're right. We don't have it as much, and that's where when you were talking about Hal Moore doing this PR part of things, that is that outreach that needs to happen.
Of course, we haven't been back to school, so maybe it's different.
I mean, is it different? Mike, you have kids. Is it different? They're too young for that, right? But you did World War II Christmas, the night before Christmas, so that's that thing. That's that step it in. And
I love that book.
Yeah, I love that too. Me too. So, Mike, you're also sending us to Fort Knox. Are we going to get out?
Yes.
Isn't that where all the money is?
Oh, of course.
General Don Starry was there. Have you been there? Because when you were in Kentucky, did you go there?
I have.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
I have a long-rooted history with Fort Knox. For one, I was born there, and I was also stationed there myself for about 18. The first 18 months that I was on active duty, I was stationed there.
Wow.
That was my first duty assignment before I transferred to Fort Bliss. So
wow.
I have a very long-rooted history with Fort Knox in the Fort Knox area, and place very richly steeped in history.
Wow.
Cool.
I can't wait. And when we're there in Kentucky, we're going to do Abraham Lincoln's national birthplace. And also Mammoth Cave. We have to go there. But also General Don Starry, Fort Bliss, Texas. A couple of them had been there, too. So when Fort Bliss, that's near El Paso, right? So when we go to Chamizal National Memorial, that's going to be near them, right? When we go there to El Paso.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Wow. Okay, there's so many places. You're going to send us to the White Sand Missile Range? Cool. I'm scared. Are we going to get blown up? But
well, as long as you don't hear any sirens, you know that you'll be okay.
Wow. Well, Mike, we're so excited about this mission, and we're so excited about you being part of the Big Blend family and being our military historian expert. Definitely, as you can see today, I mean, we just throw you on the show. Hey, come on, come host the show. And who knew? And I was like, wow, look at that. That's military history. So we can't wait. Military Mike will be back on our special military show on January 2nd. It's going to be great. And I think you'll be co-hosting that again, Mike. Are you ready? Are you ready for your
ready.
mission? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
We love it.
Awesome job.
I know. But before you go, okay, you know that we're going to put you in the time machine. Are you ready for that? I know
yes,
you
ma'am.
are. Okay. Beaming up in that missile. Okay, so military Mike, you're in the time machine. We want out. Where are we getting out? And what time, what era is it? Is it in the future? Are we going to Mars?
Well, let's see. I will drop you guys off in 1986.
Ooh. Okay.
I will drop you off in 1986. Let's say 1986 Los Angeles. And let's see, at about this time, the Bengals have a #1 hit. Ronald Reagan's in the White House, and gas is $1.08 a gallon.
Oh, wow. Okay, so 1986. We weren't in this country, so it's good. We can come in and see what it was like. We weren't here at that time. So that's cool. And the fashion was interesting, wasn't it? The Bangles being the
sure
hit.
was.
I remember the Bangles. I remember them. I listened to them when I was a kid. I listened to them. Okay. No, they were actually, you know what? They're underrated. Just saying.
Okay.
Okay, so is there military history involved in this, or are we going to talk music and Ronald Reagan?
Well, yeah, I'll throw a little bit of military history in there. So if you were enjoying your nightly episode of Miami Vice, you probably had the TV interrupted with a special bulletin, most likely narrated by Peter Jennings or Ted Koppel, telling you that the U.S. had just begun a bombing campaign in Libya, that an American carrier was off the shore for what would be called Operation El Dorado Canyon, and this was in retaliation to Muammar al-Gaddafi's aggression against the citizens of the free world.
Wow. Okay, so why are you are you coming with us? Well, I don't want to be alone on this. But I mean, this
well,
is,
sure.
Libya is crazy. So why are you fascinated by this? Do you remember this?
Well, no, I don't remember it. I mean, I was alive at the time, but I didn't have any cognition of what was happening. A lot of the contingency operations of the 80s, they've always fascinated me. Whether it was us having troops in El Salvador, or having troops in Nicaragua, or even the invasions of Grenada and Panama. All of these little brush fire engagements, I guess as you can call them, really just signified, I think, to the American people that, hey, this military that we trashed so much at the end of Vietnam is a unique fighting force that's all volunteer. None of these guys are conscripts, and look at the bang-up job that they're doing.
And when they go into different countries, they also help rebuild.
Well,
yeah.
I want to just take a second here to point out the purpose of what was happening at that time was to preserve democracy. And people tend to forget that, but it was actually a way of protecting the democracy that we have in this country by making sure that other countries also had democracy. Am I wrong on that?
No. We've now, for better or for worse, because a lot of times the results have been mixed. Since the end of the Second World War, we've done our best to try and help some of these countries back on their feet and help them build stable democracies. I mean, it's worked wonderfully in places like Germany and Japan and also South Korea. I mean, we see how far they've come. The other places, maybe not so much, but, for better or for worse, that has been our policy.
Because if you can preserve democracy, which is free will and able to vote, and nothing's ever perfect. We all know that. But the more countries that are democracy, the better for everybody who wants to be able to live free.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's true. And I remember just going back to about all these different, what you say, brush fires. Like it's a little bit bigger when you're living in those countries when that stuff happens. It just is. But it sounds. I know what you mean. It's not like a full battle, but there's stuff going on, and I don't think people know. Like, I think you're really right about bringing this up because people don't always know what's going on the other side. And I remember Craig Mullaney being on our show years ago. When we first started the show, he wrote The Unforgiving Minute. I don't know if you've read that, Mike. And he was on and he was serving, and we were talking about, he was talking about Afghanistan and everything was going on. And he said, what people don't know is I was building a greenhouse. He was fighting, but on the other side of his day was building a greenhouse for the community he was in. And I think that's where a lot of people don't see that part. There's the defense, and then there's the rebuild. And I want to see, I want those stories out there a little bit more for people to understand that connection. I think the PR thing has to happen, like Hal Moore, right? We have to have that more out there for people to understand. But okay, the 80s. Okay, I'm with you on that. Nancy, Reagan era. You remember the Iraqi? Remember the hostages?
Yeah, I know. I mean, the 80s were so crazy. Like, okay, I went through the 60s as a kid, and then I was like, oh man, we're right back here in the 80s.
I know, and people forget it, and it's coming back along with the music. Excuse me. Mike, thank you so much for the mission. It's accepted. We're doing it. We're ready. We got White Missiles, right down the road here. We got El Paso down the road. We've got Colorado. Apparently, we're going to go skiing. Good luck for us on that. We'll be calling you with broken legs. No, just kidding. But we're very excited about this and excited about the journey and look forward to having you back on the show January 2nd. Everyone, again, you've got to go get Mike Guardia's books. Go to MikeGuardia.com. He's on Amazon as well. The latest book out. He's got the Christmas book for kids, World War II, Night Before Christmas, and Hal Moore,
love that book.
A Life in Pictures, and also Crusader, General Don Starry and the Army of His Times. So many books and really fascinating. And he's taught me a lot in regards to how, maneuvers are made, how to do leadership. It's so fascinating to read. And I know that you're going to be back on January 2nd to tell us a little bit more about your writing style. But are you writing another book that we should know about? What's going on over the holiday season? Are you working on another one?
Well, I won't be doing any more writing until after the first of the year, but what you can expect on the horizon for 2019 is a book called Wings of Fire, and that is a combat history of the F-15.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, you're going to have to educate us on that. We're excited. Okay. There's always something.
Ooh.
Always something with you. Everyone, MikeGuardia.com, and don't forget, keep up with us at LoveYourParksTour.com. We're going to be putting up all our mission stories, and you'll be able to follow along there. And also, we have a new blog coming up on that as well. But, Mike, we have a song for you, and this is a special song. And it really goes with even where you work, right, and serve. It's called Colors of the USA. It's from Doreen Taylor. And she wrote this song as part of the centennial of the National Park Service, and really to pay tribute to the history that the National Park Service protects, preserves, and also interprets and teaches us about the history. And, of course, where you serve, that's part of it, right? Your fort. So anyway, Colors of the USA, everyone, you can keep up with Doreen. Go to DoreenTaylorMusic.com. She's amazing, Billboard charting contemporary artist. And here it is. And keep up with us all at BigBlendRadio.com. Thank you all for joining us, Mike. And a special thank you for co-hosting today. You can be our co-pilot anytime.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Lisa. As always, it is an absolute pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for your service as well and for keeping us educated.
And happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays to you and your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to you, too, as well.
Here it is, everyone. Colors of the USA. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Big Blend Radio. And don't forget, go to MikeGuardia.com.
Mighty land of mine, this world around me changed. Every day